Young Turks, Cenk, Uygur, David Shuster with you guys. So we have a hell of a show for you guys. Republicans have removed the bottom of the barrel one more time. Can they go lower? Always, always. This time they vote against contraception. Absolutely mental. That's later in the program. And then, but they're not the only crazy politicians. We got some on the Democratic side too. That's the real news. That's what we do. So without further ado, maybe the biggest news of the day, depending on how things go, David.
Cenk, on this day, President Biden's health was breaking news, prompting the broadcast networks with all their dramatic alerts and music to cut into regular programming.
Good morning, everybody. We are coming on the air with breaking news out of the White House. The president has tested positive for COVID-19. That, according to a statement from the White House released just moments ago. The White House saying that the president is experiencing mild symptoms and has started taking an antiviral medication called Paxlovid.
Paxlovid is a pill, it's an oral pill that high-risk COVID patients take to avoid having to be hospitalized. As the Washington Post reported, Biden, who is 79 years old, is in a relatively high-risk group, experienced a running nose, fatigue, and dry cough beginning Wednesday evening, according to White House physician Kevin O'Connor. Biden immediately canceled a planned trip to Pennsylvania on Thursday and will isolate at the White House until he tests negative. This is the latest dramatic moment in a pandemic that has killed more than 1 million Americans and affected virtually every American. Biden is fully vaccinated. He's been boosted twice. And again, from the Washington Post, this infection comes as the highly contagious Omicron subvariant BA.5 rips across the country, and as the virus has increasingly seeped into Biden's inner circle, infecting everyone from his family members to many of his top advisors, including his chief medical advisor, Anthony Fauci. President Biden sought to reassure staff and supporters on this day through a tweet. He tweeted, "Folks, I'm doing great. Thanks for your concern. Just called Senator Casey, Congressman Cartwright, Mayor Cognetti, and my Scranton cousins to send my regrets for missing our event today, keeping busy." This was the second straight day when Biden health news turned into breaking news. On Wednesday, while President Biden was talking at a clean energy climate change event in Somerset, Massachusetts, the president said he had cancer and blamed it on an oil-soaked Delaware upbringing. Watch.
The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer, and why can't for the longest time. Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
The White House quickly went into damage control mode and clarified that President Biden was referring to a minor non-malignant skin cancers that he had removed before he became president. Still, the Biden misspeak, verbal gaffe, combined with concerns about COVID now have reinforced some Democratic concerns about his overall health and his age, and maybe whether or not he's suffering any sort of cognitive decline. The greater political challenge, though, for President Biden has to do with his poll ratings, and they stink. According to the latest Quinnipiac approval-disapproval rating, President Biden stands at just 31% of Americans approving of his job as president, 60% disapprove, and this is the worst approval rating in the Quinnipiac poll for Joe Biden since he took office. And to put it in perspective, Joe Biden's approval rating in the Quinnipiac poll is actually lower than the approval rating Donald Trump had shortly after January the 6th insurrection. Cenk, thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, Biden's in a world of trouble, not through COVID, but because of his poll numbers. I got another one for you, David. New poll just came out of Iowa, a very relevant political state in America. Biden's down at 27% approval rating in Iowa, 27%. So these are disastrous numbers, and there's a number of reasons why, and one of it is slightly related to the cancer gaffe, I guess. So as to why he said that, who knows what goes through the mind of Joe Biden. It might have been, to be fair to him, that he had non-melanoma skin cancer cells removed earlier in his life, and he might have been referring to that. That's the most benign explanation and a good one, okay? And it might have been that he had COVID and he said cancer instead of COVID, but I don't think so. I think I read into the details of how they found out he had COVID this morning, and it does appear they found out this morning. Most likely it's a verbal slip up, but which has gotten him into a lot of trouble because people are worried that he's too old and doesn't know what he's doing. I think the substance proves that way more than any slip up that's stylistic. But the other part of it is like there's one possibility that nobody ever considers in mainstream media that they should. Biden tells tall tales all the time, right? Not a little bit. He's got a history of not just making things up, but making things up that are egregious, not even close to true. Like getting arrested with Nelson Mandela in South Africa, that never happened. I mean, that is an insane thing to make up. And so I don't know if he was just trying to get sympathy there or if it was just a slip up. But overall, in terms of COVID, as you can tell, I'm getting to a third. I'm not overly concerned. The fact that he is double vaccinated, double boosted does make a giant difference. And that's why people are justifiably, I think, not overly concerned. He's 79 years old. You still got to worry a little bit. But if he was not vaccinated, are you kidding me? This would be the first 4 or 5 stories in the rundown because everybody would be concerned that he would be, with his health what it is and his age what it is, that he'd be in a lot of trouble. And so, but thank God he is. And that goes to show you, if he recovers as we suspect, you ought to put a couple of thoughts behind getting vaccinated and boosted. And David, to give you a sense of how I'm thinking ahead, I got boosted on Wednesday night. It's my second booster shot. So I'm not saying that I could tell the future. I'm just saying, okay.
Well, and it may have been the case also that, I mean, maybe he wasn't even really thinking about COVID when he made the cancer slip, that he was just concerned because he was trying to make some sort of point about fossil fuels and how much they can pollute things. And somehow just sort of, as he's often done, he misspoke about when he got cancer and said, I have cancer, and meant to say had cancer. Fair or not, whether Biden's health issues or low approval ratings are gonna put a drag on him for some time, fair or not, there is a growing echo chamber, particularly among the Democratic establishment, that maybe Joe Biden should not run for re-election. The polls show that most Americans think that he should not run for re-election, and that has prompted a lot of speculation among strategists about Michelle Obama. And the reason is because Mrs. Obama just announced that she has a new book that is coming out and will be published November 15th. It's called The Light We Carry. And look at how Mrs. Obama described it and essentially teased it in a video she just released. Watch.
I can't believe it's been a few years since I published my memoir, Becoming. And in that time, a lot has happened. We've seen a global pandemic. We've seen an insurrection, a rising tide of hate and bigotry and intolerance and a whole lot more. And it's often left me feeling out of balance. I don't know about you, I felt vulnerable. And yes, at times I felt afraid. How do we overcome? How do we overcome our fears? How can we channel our frustration into something positive?
How do we channel into something positive? Well, Cenk, I've been told by a couple of Democratic strategists now that there have been some Democratic donors and some operatives who have gone to the Obamas and say, look, we don't know whether Joe Biden is going to run for re-election or not. But Michelle Obama, if he decides not to run, would you at least consider it? And as far as I've been told, the door has not been completely shut by Michelle Obama. She seems to like the attention. The speculation, of course, would only be great for her book sales and highlight her at a time when she's trying to, sell this book and perhaps match the 17 million books that she sold the first time around. Whether or not Michelle Obama is the savior that the Democratic Party thinks she might be, if let's say Donald Trump is the nominee and Democrats are looking up at, well, who's their star that can match him? I'm not so sure about that, but there's certainly a lot of speculation now driven by Joe Biden's awful low approval ratings and some hopes that perhaps Michelle Obama can somehow come in and rescue the Democratic Party.
So I'm going to say that I predicted this about a month ago to a friend of mine, but it doesn't count because it wasn't on air. So let me say it on air for the first time here. They're going to consider Michelle Obama several times between now and 2024. And the time that they're going to consider her the most is when it looks like a progressive might get the nomination. Right now, we're not anywhere near that fact pattern. Mainstream media and corporate Democrats and Republicans have all ganged up on progressives. We're probably at our very nadir 24/7. Every single person in Washington attacks progressives. We don't have a viable candidate. So it sounds fanciful to say that a progressive might actually challenge Biden or whoever the establishment puts up if Biden doesn't run. But it is not at all fanciful. I'm here to tell you right now that a progressive will make a very strong run in 2024 because it's natural, it's obvious. If you have a primary, a progressive will be in it, and progressives are much more popular than do-nothing moderate Democrats. So this is the first wave of Michelle Obama panic, but the most significant wave will be when a progressive is ascendant in a Democratic presidential primary. Then they're gonna wanna bring Michelle Obama in because she's royalty, and if we're being honest about it, they'll get to weaponize identity politics and love the Obamas and the Democratic electorate at a nuclear level to try to fend off a progressive. But David, at the end of the day, yeah, it might be good for book sales, but I would be surprised if when they go low, we go high. Michelle Obama would deign to enter the dirty fray of electoral politics, where she will not have an opportunity to go high, and her opponents will go very, very low. And I think the Obamas are royalty now, and I don't think they're gonna climb down from their castle to get back in the mud.
I think you're right. And Michelle Obama has said to many friends through the years that she knows what a horrible job being president really is and how much worse actually running for president and all the political complications that it entails and all the bargains and deals that you have to make. She hates retail politics. That's not her thing. And so I sort of come down on, look, she's gonna enjoy all the attention. She's gonna enjoy the Democratic Party saying, oh my God, we're being challenged, whether it's by progressive or because the Democratic brand is in such terrible shape. She will enjoy the attention, but I think at the end of the day, she's gonna say, no, that's not me. I don't want it handed to me on a silver platter. I don't want the job. I've been there for 8 years. I've seen how difficult it is, how much pressure it causes. That's not something I need. Go find somebody else. And we'll see what the Democratic Party does.
So that first wave of Michelle Obama panic tells you the sorry state that Joe Biden's in. And that's the point of this story, right? So the minute he has a touch of COVID, people are like, okay, that's it. Call the bullpen, bring in Michelle. Forget Buttigieg, forget Kamala Harris, forget everyone. And it's because they know the voters don't like those folks. Why? The reality is because they're corporate Democrats. And honestly, Michelle Obama wouldn't be any better at all, as far as we know. If she's anything like Barack Obama, that's corporate Democrat extraordinaire. So that's why the fact that they're panicking to the point of discussing Michelle Obama 3 months before the midterms shows you how disastrous a shape Joe Biden is in. And by the way, while we were talking, news broke now. The awful, hideous Republicans in Congress that just voted no on protecting contraception rights. I mean, just absolute Neanderthals. Now more popular than Joe Biden with Latino voters. This is an epic disaster.
And Democrats, look, they have a lot of work to do, right? I mean, all the polls show that the Democrats are losing ground among Latino voters. African-American voters are not as strongly supportive of Democrats. Democrats are losing white working class voters. They're trending more now towards college educated, but they're losing those who are not college educated. In other words, Democrats, the party of the working class, that's changing. And whether it's because the Democrats are not being progressive enough, which is what I would argue, or because the Democrats have sort of lost their way. I mean, the Republicans are not doing anything to change this. It's not because Republicans are offering something that's causing white working class voters to drag over to Republicans. The Democratic Party is not serving the needs of working class Americans. It has lost its way. And I think there's an argument to be made that it's lost its way because people see that the Democratic policies, the establishment centrist policies, have not done anything for them. They're not delivering. And there's also this perception that the Democrats are just as hardwired towards corporate America as the Republicans are.
Yeah, all right, we've got to take a quick break here. When we come back, we've got a Senate candidate in trouble for a potentially racist past. Which party is that Senate candidate from? Well, that might be surprising when we return. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and David with you guys, but also Shells, Zeke B, Kristen Lowell, Frank Lomeli, and Jamie Timberman. Look at all those wonderful people who just joined by hitting that join button below the video on YouTube. Thank you guys. And of course, if you're watching us anywhere else, and we're on almost all the platforms, just search TYT or the Young Turks on any platform that you have on your home television set or anywhere else. Remember, membership is just as easy at tyt.com/join. Okay, now we've got an exclusive story for you guys, so that's interesting. Okay, so let's do that. All right, well, we've got an interesting race shaping up in Missouri, and it's got charges that one of the candidates has a racist past. Wow, so let's look into it a little bit. So apparently this candidate won a beauty pageant back in the 1970s, to be fair, at something called a Veiled Prophet Ball. Well, what in the world's a veiled prophet? What does that look like? Well, let's show you what the veiled prophet looks like. This is from a picture that they depict of the, oh yeah, that looks like a Klan member. And by the way, I noticed later carrying a gun, just because if you weren't sure how deeply racist this ball was, they wanted to be clear. No, it's meant for absolute intimidation of minorities. Now, it's not just based on what the veiled prophet that the ball is named after. It looks like they excluded blacks and Jews from this ball all the way to 1979. The Senate candidate won the beauty contest in 1977. But she's not the only one who's gotten in trouble for winning that beauty contest. So did Ellie Kemper. You might have seen this in the news last year. She's the star of the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. And she won that ball as well. So this is a thing that's happened in St. Louis for a long time, but people have also known that it was deeply racist for a long time. And there has been civil rights protests against it for decades now. So people saying, oh, well, golly gee, I didn't know. That's obviously disingenuous, but we have video in a second of the Senate candidate. Well, let me show you who she is and what her name is. It's Trudy Bush Valentine, and she's running for the Senate in Missouri. Now here comes a twist. She's a Democrat. Okay, so now she put out a statement, of course, saying, oh my God, I'm sorry that I ever went. I didn't know back then, and I feel bad about it. Okay, standard, and maybe she means that it was a long time ago, right? But then you find out she appeared at the ball in 1979. So that's the second time. She said she only went in 77 when she won. And then in 1990, and then her daughter, Christina Valentine Kamen, was at the 2010 Veiled Prophet Ball, escorted by her uncle, Peter Bush. Bush, that's gonna come into, what's named Bush? Anheuser-Busch? Well, okay, hold on, we'll get to that as well. So 2010 is pretty recent. Now that's her daughter. But you would, if my daughter was going to go to a deeply racist ball that I, went to earlier and got in trouble for going to earlier several times, I would have tried real hard to talk her out of it. So this is not just from the 70s; it's 90 and 2010, etc. So before we go to why in the world the Democrats are supporting her, we have exclusive video at TYT of a situation where she is being asked about it, she speaks about it, and her and presumably her supporters all laugh it off. So let's watch that video right now.
Do you feel that the Veiled Prophet is racist?
Yeah. In my time, it was very racist.
And you were just stupid.
Yeah, I was just stupid. I know. Yeah, I was just trying to get through nursing school. Believe me. I was trying to get through organic chemistry and biology.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, no, as I just stated the history for you guys, that's not really true, and it's not much of a laughing matter. So you might be wondering, why in the world go to this person that has this troubled past and create issues for yourself, especially with the Republicans creating such racial animus in the country. It doesn't seem like that'd be the smart way to go for the Democratic Party. Well, let's go to The Intercept to get some explanation here of what might have happened. On Monday, when they wrote the story, Bush Valentine announced a bid for the Senate in the Democratic primary. Her late and unexpected campaign to succeed retiring Senator Roy Blunt coincided with the exit from the race of former Democratic State Senator Scott Sifton, who immediately endorsed her. Oh, that's curious. It almost looks like that was coordinated. But why would Sifton even want to get out? Well, let's keep reading and see what happens. Sifton had received the support of many elected Democrats in Missouri. Of course he had, because he's an establishment Democrat, including State Auditor Nicole Galloway, but struggled to raise money. I wonder if there's somebody else in the race who did not struggle to raise money and who's actually an excellent, viable candidate for the Democrats. Actually, there is. Lance Kunce. He is a progressive and a populist, right? Constantly talks about the working man in Missouri and how we've got to do economic populism. Now that is very popular, and he's way outraised the establishment Democrats. Remember all the time that the establishment Democrats told you, and it was almost a half admission, all we care about is the money. But wait a minute, the populist candidate has more money in this case and more popularity. So problem solved. You don't need that establishment state's legislator. No, but he's a progressive, so they can't have that. So they had, since the other establishment Democrat was not doing that well in the primary against him, they had to remove him as a last second, we're gonna lose Hail Mary, and they put in Trudy Bush Valentine. Now, why did they put her in? Well, let's find out. With Bush Valentine, the Missouri Democratic Party will get a high net donor and insider, one who hosted a fundraiser for presidential candidate Hillary Clinton in 2016 at her family estate, okay? So, by the way, that family estate was featured in her political ad, which we showed you a still picture of earlier, and it was on her farm, and she talked about how she was a single mother raising 6 children on that farm. What she neglected to tell you is she inherited that farm along with $250 million. So spare me a single mother struggling along to get on the farm. Another thing she neglected to tell you is that farm used to be a slave plantation. Not what I would have featured in a political ad. And finally, this also must have greatly appealed to the Democratic leadership. Her brother, August Bush III, is also a prolific donor, giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to a contender in the Republican primary and her potential rival in the general election, Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt. Democrats in Washington love people that are associated with Republican donors. So, David, what do you think of this Hail Mary? Is it gonna work? Is it a disaster? Thoughts?
Well, first of all, for everybody who likes Bush beer, including me, this is something that I didn't know. There's an heiress to the Bush beer family who is using her connections in terms of her wealth to say to Democrats, woe is me, single mother of 6. I only have 6 nannies, 7 nannies. This is ridiculous. At a certain point, the Democrats have to, and this should be clear to everybody. The goal of the Democratic Party right now is to stamp out progressive candidates. They will unite, they will rally behind whoever they feel has the most money, the most donor connections to be able to put down Democratic progressives. We've seen it in state after state. We're seeing it again in Missouri. Never mind whether this woman is even qualified. And I would argue that based on her background, attending a racist white nationalist ball, she should have never run for office in the first place. But the Democratic Party has blinders on. The moment you say, hey, I'm the heiress to a wealthy family and I can pay for my own campaign and I know a lot of other wealthy people, boom, you are the establishment candidate.
Yeah, and by the way, I slipped up earlier. I said Lance, I meant Lucas, of course. It's Lucas Kunce, and he's doing fantastic in that race. I mean, but David, that really goes to the Democratic leadership and Democratic consulting class betraying themselves. Because and mainstream media too, because they all play this game of like, oh golly gee, we don't care which Democrat, we just whichever one has the best chance of winning. But Lucas is doing great in fundraising, in polling. He's doing a populist campaign where he's trying to appeal to the average working class person in Missouri. All of these are far more likely to work and far more likely to get you the victory in that critical Senate seat in Missouri. Imagine if we pick up a Senate seat in Missouri, that would be amazing. And they're like, yes, but he's not incredibly wealthy. And so not good enough. We're worried that he might actually do those populist programs, and we need someone who has hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're assured that she will not be for any change at all, and she'll try to keep the current status quo exactly as it is.
And that status quo includes employing a lot of Democratic establishment operatives and strategists because she has so much money. None of them are going to say to the Democratic Party, wait a second, maybe we should go with this other guy. No, they're going to say, of course, go with the wealthy person, because that's more money that she can bring into the Democratic National Committee, to the DCC, to the DSC. I mean, somebody who's loaded will attract a lot of people in the Democratic Party who are also part of this corrupt system. Will say, yes, of course you should run. Yes, of course you would be a great senator. There's nobody saying to her, wait a second, well, maybe you're not the best candidate because of your background, or maybe we should actually test whether the progressive policies that are being put forward by a rival actually resonate better with Missouri voters.
Yep. Sounds like the Democratic Party to me, unfortunately. All right, so now I got another story for you guys about Democrats, but this one has good guys in it, so that's positive. Let's go to that. In California, there is a ballot measure to get the minimum wage up to $18. That would make a massive difference for people. In fact, you're gonna help put that on the ballot in a second. And you know how much money you're gonna move into workers' pockets if you help to do this? $62.4 billion. Now, why is that? Because the extra wages that California workers would get in the next 2 years from this one ballot measure is no joke. It's actually $62 billion. So, and you can move that actually fairly easily. So I'm gonna show you how you can do that in a second. Why do I say 2 years? Well, this was supposed to be on the 2022 ballot in California. It's slated to pass really easily because people are in favor of higher wages for themselves. Of course, and that's why the Republican parties had set against it, but we're worried that Democratic leaders like Gavin Newsom might also be against it, and that's the point where you come into play in a second. But Gavin Newsom could put it on the ballot right away in 2022, and it got over 1 million signatures. It only needed about 660,000 signatures, and it got way past that. But because of a bureaucratic snafu, they're saying, no, it's gonna go on the 2024 ballot because corporate interests would like to keep that extra $62 billion and not give it to their workers. So how are you gonna change that? First, I want you to know one other fact about this. The people who will move up from $15 to $18 in California will get a wage increase of $6,240 every single year. So you wanna give people a $6,000 raise? Especially if you live in California, you're gonna give it to yourself. Well, we got a petition to make that happen, okay? So it's at tyt.com/petitions/California as in CA minimum wage. Okay, but you can just go to tyt.com/petitions and you'll see it there. It's really easy, and we'll have the URL down below. Now, if a lot of people sign this petition, is it possible to move Gavin Newsom into supporting the petition? Of course, okay. And I'm gonna show you how obvious it is for Gavin Newsom right now. New polling conducted this week shows that more than 2/3 of California voters support the measure. Well, if 2/3 support the measure, this is a no-brainer, right? And 3 in 4 voters, that's 75% of voters, support Governor Newsom placing the measure directly on the November ballot, which he can do right away. He has the authority to do that. So this is an easy fix. Governor Gavin Newsom's thinking of running for president. He's positioning himself as someone who cares about progressive issues and the average working person, and he can get them a $6,000 raise with just a stroke of a pen. So far, his office says, no, we're not going to do it. Why? That doesn't make any sense. Unless, of course, business interests are affecting Gavin Newsom and his fundraising are. Well, look, he has a chance to prove it either way. Either he can get 75% of California voters to go, yeah, Gavin Newsom, awesome, I love the raise that you helped me get, right? Or he could take a deeply unpopular position. There's only one reason you would take a deeply unpopular position, and that's the money. Okay, so now, guys, enough of you sign that petition, and there will be a world of pressure on him. And we're gonna try to make sure that there's a world of pressure on him so we can get you that raise. And imagine if we win, if all of us together win, you sign that petition and you're part of that change. Then you get to feel great. I know I'm gonna feel great about it. Oh my God, I got people a $6,000 raise. We moved $62 billion from corporate pockets into the pockets of hardworking Americans working really hard jobs. Okay, so I wanna give you guys a sense of how much our wages are not keeping up, not just with inflation today, but inflation historically and productivity in the country. We've told you before, if the minimum wage had kept up with productivity in America, right now it'd be at about $24 an hour. Not 15, not 18, not the current federal minimum wage, which is $7.25. It would be at $24. Okay, so but these are interesting examples that came out today, actually, in the news. So they compared how much it costs to go to the movies in the 1960s compared to the movies, go to the movies today. And then you see that here. They did this in a couple of categories. Once you adjust for inflation, the price for the tickets, the popcorn, et cetera, for movies would have been $34.15. But right now, it's a $68.73. Now, why does that make a difference? Because if you're a working family in America, it now, adjusted for inflation, costs you twice as much to go to the movies. It's so hard to do anything. Your wages are lower and all other prices are higher. Now, if you want to go to Disneyland in 1960, it cost, again, the parking lot, Disneyland, all the things that are associated with it cost, again, adjusted for inflation, $359.96. Now it costs $1,055, okay? So that is 2.5 times what it costs. Look, for the average family, and this one is conservative because now in the old days, families had only one breadwinner. Now they have 2 breadwinners and they still can't keep up. For the average family to just go to a baseball game or to a movie or to Disneyland, look at the hours of work required to attend those family outings. So if you want to go to Disneyland, for example, you have to work almost 100% more, twice as many hours to be able to just take one nice day with your family, okay? Now, if you're working minimum wage, let me show you those numbers. And remember, Disneyland in a couple of different places, but obviously the main theme park here is here in California. Our own workers can't afford the attraction that people come from all over the world to see. Now, if you're at minimum wage, it's at 299%. That means you have to work 3 times as many hours, or maybe sometimes 3 times as many jobs to be able to afford what you afforded back in 1960 today. So this is among the many, many reasons why we need a much higher minimum wage. California can lead the way, and Gavin Newsom can do it. Sign the petition at tyt.com/petitions. And make a difference, and let's get Governor Newsom to put this on the ballot. He could do it right now if we create enough pressure. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I'm so glad that you highlighted this story because again, it does underscore how much wages have sort of slowed down through the years and how much less buying power we have. But there's the other side about this is also, Cenk, that if you look at sort of Hollywood, you look at baseball. I mean, baseball used to be the national pastime. Now you could argue that Major League Baseball has become not just the national pastime, but the national pastime of greed, because the cost from some of these teams and some of the leagues, they're also somewhat responsible for how explosive the costs have gone up. So it's a combination both of, yes, working class wages have not kept up, but also I think there's a greed that has seeped into America across so much, not just sort of corporate America, but also Major League Baseball is just as corporate as anything else. The same thing with Hollywood movie studios. It is obscene how much a sport like baseball is trying to make money largely from television and advertising rates how much they're trying to essentially squeeze even more money out of fans' pockets. And as a result, I think it's bad for the sport, it's bad for Hollywood, it's bad for the movies, it's bad for sports fans. When you are cutting off such a large segment of society, you are sacrificing your future in terms of having the next audience that's actually gonna come to your games or come to your movies.
And final thing, guys, is that you hear Republicans saying this all the time, but you also hear mainstream media, cable news pundits, and corporate Democrats saying that the wages are too high, that they're driving up inflation, and that the Federal Reserve is gonna take action to make sure that wages don't go any higher. How come they never talk about all of the products and services and goods going up way higher? Are they trying to stop that? Are they trying to stop the corporate profits that have led to this inflation? No, the only thing they're trying to stop is your wages from going up higher. The good news is in California, you can do ballot measures. And by the way, in a lot of states, you can do ballot measures. And every state that has proposed a higher minimum wage as a ballot measure has passed it. Every single one, it doesn't matter how red they are, Missouri, Arkansas, Florida, they've all passed it, and easily. This will pass in California. It should pass right now. And honestly, Governor Newsom has no excuse not to put it on the ballot immediately. All right, we're gonna take a quick break here. We've got a lot more where that came from, including an article in the Washington Post, a column, where they actually explain the truth about progressives versus moderates. Who let that happen? Okay, it's got nuance too, though. There are things to criticize in there as well. But let's come back and talk about that. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and David and James Gerard and Passionate Rebellion and Phantasmic Panda and Donald Townsend. These are all the wonderful, wonderful people who just joined by hitting that join button below on YouTube. We could do the show together, guys. We read your comments. We learn from you, and I love that you're part of us. And we try to bring positive change in the world. So sign that petition at tyt.com/petitions. Join if you can. And David's got more news for you.
What is going on with the Washington Post? The Washington Post just published a remarkable op-ed on this day defending progressive Democrats and attacking the Democratic Party establishment, sort of. The opinion column was by Perry Bacon, a longtime reporter there. It's titled, "Why Progressive Democrats Are Losing Ground." Bacon writes, "The ascendance of more left-wing politicians and policies within the Democratic Party may have peaked, with real potential that some progressive advances will be stalled." Bacon refers to basically 4 different areas: economic policy, like through the stimulus, social safety net, expanding Medicare and Medicaid, addressing disparities and discrimination, particularly in law enforcement and police, and also electoral politics. Bacon notes that big problems emerged in each of these areas last year, and that the centrist Democrats then blamed the left. Specifically, there was a surge in murder rates in New York City. The centrist mayor of New York City, the new mayor, blamed a sort of soft on crime effort, but he said by progressives, and saying that police reform was somehow to blame. Inflation, which went up, which was being blamed, of course, on spending. The Build Back Better legislation failed. Some centrist Democrats said it was because progressives were demanding too much. And then, of course, there were the election races and gubernatorial races where some Democrats lost, and you had consultants like James Carville who were blaming progressives for hurting the Democratic brand. Well, Bacon writes, however, these arguments were oversimplifications, and in some cases they were outright wrong. More than that, real world events were in fact validating the left's arguments. Child poverty plummeted when the federal government simply gave families money directly through tax credits and the stimulus, the kind of big government policy the left has urged. The political struggles of Biden and McAuliffe in Virginia showed, as the left has argued, that voters won't be satisfied with a do-little Democratic Party, even if it is fairly moderate ideologically and focused on wooing white swing voters. The murder rate surged, even as police spending either stayed the same or increased, bolstering the progressive argument that reducing crime will take more comprehensive strategies than just relying on law enforcement. Bacon goes on and says, but despite all of that, the centrist arguments gained traction. That's partly because the mainstream media, the wealthy, and Biden himself are skeptical of progressives and inclined to take the side of centrist Democrats in intra-party rights. Wait a second, did the Washington Post just say that the wealthy the wealthy take the side of centrist Democrats and that Joe Biden does as well, and that they're skeptical of progressives. Look out for Perry Bacon. Hopefully he will not disappear. Anyway, he continues. He says, because these anti-left arguments have become conventional wisdom in Democratic circles, they are resulting in policy and electoral defeats for the party's left wing. Biden started downplaying police reform while he and other Democrats leaned into pro-police rhetoric and funding increases. Most of BBB has been shelved. The Federal Reserve, with the encouragement of many centrist Democrats, is taking aggressive steps to rein in inflation that are likely to reduce wages and increase unemployment. Now, Bacon does include some criticism of progressives, and this is interesting. He writes, left-wing Democrats are struggling in part because they don't have a formal leadership structure or political strategy. And Bacon says that trouble is brewing for progressives because if the Democratic Party led by Joe Biden gets killed in the midterm elections, Joe Biden and the centrist Democrats will blame the left wing in the party and say it's their fault that they ruined the Democratic brand. But Bacon says all is not lost for progressives. He concludes with, quote, while more centrist Democrats have greater power and money, many of the party's most compelling ideas and figures come from its left wing. The left's arguments that the party's political strategy is outdated have been validated by Biden's struggles. This was in the Washington Post. Remarkable.
Yeah, so it is really damning that we're doing a breaking news story on the Washington Post, actually printing a progressive point of view. And we're startled by it. Like, I mean, and the hilarious thing is, of course, the right wing has called mainstream media liberal media for the last 40, 50 years. And they've totally internalized, oh yeah, we're liberal. No, you're not anywhere near liberal. That's why when there's actually a left-wing points made that are based on facts, absolute indisputable facts, it's like shocking that it has appeared in a mainstream media outlet like the Washington Post. Okay, so in terms of Perry Bacon's conclusions, there's a couple of things that I don't fully agree with. I think he's a little bit too pessimistic about progressive chances, and he's right that we're going to get blamed for everything no matter what happens. But that doesn't mean that we're down and out. But we definitely need a comeback, that's for sure. And certainly in Washington, that is indisputable. And then he says at the end that triangulation is a thing of the past. Yeah, I mean, it should be, but it isn't. I mean, Joe Biden is triangulation 101. And if you talk to not just Democratic leadership, but almost anyone within the Democratic Party structure in Washington, every one of those fools would tell you that triangulation is still the right idea. They would still tell you that there should be somewhere between Republicans and Democrats, and they should kiss the ass of Republicans. And just today on the contraception vote, Nancy Pelosi mentioned her Republican friends 2 or 3 times. They voted against contraception, and she's still calling them my Republican friends. And she beseeched them to vote for the bill. Of course, almost none of them did. So, but what I love about the article is facts that were in there. So Joe Biden is not a progressive. I mean, just really, really simple facts. We fought tooth and nail against him in the primary because he has been, you can call it moderate, conservative, corporate, establishment Democrat his whole life. No one in the world thinks that he's progressive, but they're like, but in Washington, every other piece, and this is an opinion column, the ones that are supposed to be objective will write it as if, well, Biden's obviously having troubles because he went too far left and Democrats became too progressive. You're like, Joe Biden who just celebrated having lunches with Strom Thurmond and how much he used to love that, right? Get too far left on which planet? No, they're not even trying to be honest outside of Perry Bacon. And so, and just simple things like they say, oh, he said the left got blamed for Terry McAuliffe's loss, but Terry McAuliffe is the most establishment Democrat you'll ever find. That's just a fact. There's no question about that fact. And yet in Washington, they live in an alternate reality, not the Trump one, that there's a second alternate reality where deeply unpopular establishment Democrats are only losing because they listen to progressives. Well, one last one, David. As you pointed out, the only real progressive policy that they implemented was the child tax credit within the COVID relief bill. And that was the most popular policy they passed by a lot. And that's also in the polling. So the one time they went left, the country loved it. So what did they do? They immediately cut it off and went back to right wing, and they lost all of their popularity.
And Cenk, I got to ask you about the bit of criticism of progressives that Perry Bacon put in. He said that again, left-wing Democrats are struggling in part because they don't have a formal leadership structure or political strategy. What do you make of that?
That is overwhelmingly true. That is the truest thing ever written. And so here I'm telling you as a criticism of progressives. And so normally leaders would do planning, they would do infrastructure, et cetera. And Bernie Sanders has been very good about endorsing other progressives and putting a spotlight on them and trying to help them in his own way. But whether it's him or Elizabeth Warren or others, they have not been very good about building infrastructure. It's kind of every person for themselves. Oftentimes progressives don't even endorse other progressives in primaries because they're afraid of being yelled at by other Democrats in Washington. Look, I've got a plan, but I think I'm the only one, and that is really damning. A random talk show host shouldn't be the only person on the progressive side with a coherent plan to regain power.
Let's finish this hour, Cenk, by talking about Fox News and anti-Semitism. Fox host Jesse Waters railed against President Biden's recent announcement on climate change by targeting Bernie Sanders with an anti-Semitic trope about Jewish people. Watch.
It's hot in England, so Joe says this is a crisis in America, and he's going to bypass Congress to regulate and spend. As we told you, Joe's never cared about climate change. This is Bernie's plan. And why hasn't Massachusetts gone green already? Aren't they run by a bunch of liberal Democrats? The state of Massachusetts, you ready, gets less than 1% of its energy from renewables. The rest of it's natural gas, nuclear, and coal. So what's been stopping Massachusetts for the last decade for going green? Well, pretty much everything. You cannot power the state with windmills. It just doesn't work.
Somehow it does work for Fox News, though, to put up that graphic of Bernie Sanders essentially being the puppet master over Joe Biden. Well, as Vox writes, the narrative of white genocide is historically inextricable from the conspiracy narrative of the Jew as puppet master. This figure is supposedly both secretly, insidiously in charge of his economic and political world order and deeply committed ideologically to destabilizing ethnic and national identities. Goes on to say, since the 18th century and the political changes that followed the European Enlightenment, Jews have been treated as a scapegoat for populist anger, unfairly blamed for wider cultural anxieties about capitalism, industrialization, and increasingly diverse and cosmopolitan social landscape. Never mind all of that, it's also really bizarre for Fox News to suggest that Bernie Sanders is some sort of puppet master for Joe Biden, because here's a lot of things that Joe Biden could do right now without any Republican help that he has failed to do. Well, pass the COVID stimulus checks, pass $15 federal minimum wage, take meaningful action on climate change, keep the child tax credit, pass universal pre-K, protect reproductive rights, pass the PRO Act, ban new fracking on federal lands, pass meaningful gun control legislation, properly manage COVID outbreaks, pass voting rights. It goes on and on and on. So if Bernie Sanders really is the puppet master, well, then why isn't Joe Biden doing any of these things that progressives want? And that's because this is Fox News dabbling in anti-Semitic tropes in order to create more division and therefore create a us versus them mentality, which is how they get viewers. Cenk?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. And for those of you who are not well-versed in American politics, you might wonder why this happens. That Fox News is very in favor of America doing whatever Israel wants. So more funding for other countries that are not America? No, they hate it. America first. And then if you say, all right, so let's cut the funding for Israel, they're like, no way, no way. We should take all the money we give to everyone else and just give it to Israel. and they attack progressive legislators all the time. They're not sufficiently pro-Israel, etc. And then they do one of the most anti-Semitic tropes I've ever seen in American television. So what explains that? And by the way, this is not the first time they've done it. They did it with George Soros, who coincidentally was also Jewish. Whenever they have the puppet master picture up there, the person holding the strings is always Jewish on Fox News. So I'll solve the mystery for you guys, because Fox News is run by Christian nationalists. And so evangelical right-wing Christians believe that Israel is important to bring about Armageddon, where everyone, including the Jews, all gets slaughtered and Jesus comes back. So they're not interested in Israel to protect the Jews. In fact, as you can see with these wildly anti-Semitic accusations, they don't care about Jews at all. In fact, they're anti-Semitic. You know what else is anti-Semitic? Rooting for the death of all the Jews in your beloved Armageddon. Okay, so that's what explains their insanely pro-right-wing Israel positions and their anti-Semitism at the same time. And so, look, when it comes to anti-Semitism, there's another thing that has taken hold in the right wing that brings back another trope that has been haunting Jews across the world for hundreds of years, which is blood libel. So they used to say in Europe, and this is partly what led to the Holocaust, that the Jews drink the blood of Christian babies, okay? Even saying that sentence out loud is horrifying, right? Now, what is QAnon? A group of powerful people in Washington who are politicians and celebrities molest children on behalf of Satan and then drink their blood. So these anti-Semitic tropes have taken deep root within the right wing. And so it's not an accident that you're seeing Jesse Waters do that. They are riling people up against Jewish Americans as we speak.
And it's not just Jesse Waters. I mean, you look at Tucker Carlson, who's been dabbling in replacement theory lately, the white nationalist theory that there's a deliberate effort to replace Christians with people who are others, whether you're Latino, African American, non-Christian, like Jewish. And these, of course, are the manifesto that causes some of these mass shooters to go out and then shoot up a black grocery store or shoot up a synagogue. So this is, in my view, Cenk, again, I don't know if it's necessarily by design, but there is something that is certainly trickling down through Fox News that is tolerating this sort of nonsense and saying, yeah, the easiest way you can divide people is by dividing them between religions, dividing them between race, dividing them between sexes. That is the Fox News playbook.
Yeah, and one last thing, guys. If you're there's been a bunch of synagogue shootings among the right-wing shooters. And in a lot of their manifestos, they also talk about how the Jews control everything. And if you're watching Fox News or other right-wing media and you see them attack blacks and Latino immigrants and Muslims with no restraint at all, let alone gay people, trans people. So it's not like they have any restraint against those folks, but you don't see them saying, the Jews are a problem. Like that's a sentence they presumably wouldn't say, but I'm worried the way things are going, maybe they would. They would say the Muslims are a problem, they would say Latinos are a problem, but they don't say that. So where did the shooters get all that stuff in their head? They got it through these puppet master graphics and these insinuations and the blood libel and all those things that right-wing media is talking about nonstop. That for them, if you're not well-versed in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, first of all, congrats. I'm glad that you didn't get into that insanity, right? But if you're a right-winger that knows that stuff, when you see the puppet master picture, you go, oh, of course, yes. Because in their heart of hearts, they don't think that the immigrant that came with no money is in charge of America. They don't think Muslims or blacks are in charge of America. But in their anti-Semitic heads, they wrongly think it's the Jews. So that's why you've had the synagogue shootings. That's why you've had all this. And by the way, from my perspective, I fought like hell for the Jewish candidate, Bernie Sanders. I wish he had won. And if he was in charge, the country would be way better off, because that long list that David showed you are all incredibly popular programs you guys would have all loved, and it would have been brought to you by a Jewish president, and that would have been incredible and wonderful. And instead, we got a president who does nothing. And the idea that he's controlled by Bernie is unfortunately hilarious and ridiculous. All right, we gotta go. Everybody check out David on Rebel Headquarters. He does fantastic videos there with a lot of the news of the day, and news we don't get to cover. So make sure you're checking that out at RHQ. And when we come back, we've got a lot more for you guys, including Republicans saying, yeah, we don't want you to get contraception either. All right, we'll be back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.